So good afternoon. My name is Brian Daugherty. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Motor and Equipment Manufacturers Association. So we're the parent organization of essentially 4 automotive and transportation area supplier organizations. We represent Tier 1, 2, and 3 suppliers in the light vehicle industry through our OESA division, the suppliers to the heavy duty industry through HDMA. Then we also have an aftermarket association, ASA, and a reman association. So I'll be moderating the panel today, discussing connected vehicle technology and a lot of the aspects along with that. So we've got a great panel today, who I'll introduce here in a second, and then each one of them will give you a brief description of who they are and what they do. We'll go through a series of kind of prepared questions, really, to have a conversation here that we think will cover a lot of the issues. But feel free to ask any questions that you have. So we'll have time for questions at the end. But if you have a burning question partway through, please feel free to ask that as well. So without further ado, let's get started. To my left here, we have Will Baumgardner, who's the principal at ERA. So Will, welcome.
Thanks, Brian. My name is Will. I'm a little bit of an odd person out here because I'm not really deep into the technology. I'm a transportation planner and civil engineer by training. I'm a traffic engineer as well. And so my perspective on this is from the city side, from kind of a broad urban planning, built environment perspective. I lead AREP's intelligent mobility practice in the Americas region, which is focused, infrastructure and smart technology as part of that, but also data and analytics and how we use that to improve how our cities are operated and designed, mobility services as well. So that's the lens that I bring to it. We work for a broad set of clients, from public agencies, cities, transportation agencies and operators, major employers and institutions, property owners, land developers, and as well as industry consulting as well. So we're able to sort of connect the dots between all the different stakeholders, and everybody is, we're all here because everybody's looking at the revolution that is coming in mobility right now, and it's going to affect all of those different perspectives.
Thanks, Will. To Will's left is Brian Burkhard. He's the ITS practice group leader at Jacobs. Brian.
Thanks, Brian. I've been involved in connected and automated vehicles since about 2003. I'm similar to Will, except I take that technology and I help agencies, mostly DOTs, figure out how to build their infrastructure and maybe plan and get ready for the onset of automated and connected vehicles. And I've had the privilege to work on such projects with AASHTO, and I'm working with NCHRP panel right now on looking at dedicated dedicated lanes for automated and connected vehicles.
Great, thanks, Brian. Next we have Ray Sikka, who's the CEO of Sensitel. Ray.
Sure. Thank you. I'm Ray Sikka, founder of Sensitel, and thank you, Brian, and thank you, Prospect Silicon Valley, for inviting me here. I believe we're going to have a great discussion today with this diverse panel, and mainly because we're talking about very important things. One is how to secure your ride, and other is how to improve your life. Right. So what I bring to the panel is essentially a decade of experience in coordination and scheduling algorithms, and then another decade I spent connecting things to the internet. Now with connected cars needing coordination, I can use both skills at the same time. Right? But my passion is to essentially reimagine mobility as a service. And we were talking earlier about the rollout of Flex, and recently smart train service out there in Santa Rosa. If you look at all these rollouts, what is happening is you really can't have an effective rollout without understanding where people are, where they want to go, and how they travel, right? So that's what we bring to the table, a deep understanding of data about travelers that can improve these services. And I have some questions of my own, Brian, which I bring to the panel. So the questions I'm interested in is, first of all, whose data is it going to be, right? So now we have new infrastructure, and how do cities balance this new infrastructure with need to make this data openly available? And the other question I have in mind is, whose responsibility is it? So when we have new infrastructure, autonomous vehicles, right? If things don't go as planned, which machine will we blame? So with those two, we hope to have some discussion.
All right, thanks, Red. We'll just take a brief pause. And those of you that are standing, why don't you guys sit down? You'll be much more comfortable. Take a pause. So don't feel bad about walking in front of the panel. All right, next we have Martin Mantalvanos, the CEO of RSM. Martin.
Yep, so who are we this week? This would be a kind of easier thing to say. And I say that because this industry is changing so much and it's evolving so rapidly. But we position ourselves as a platform operating system above the hardware. So while the city is gathering sensors, while cars are gathering all this data, we see ourselves as that layer that can collate all of this. And we also kind of liken it to the first computer age, where we sat there with our personal PC, and then we had the software, and then we wondered what's next. Kind of where we are again in this industry. So we are that operating system. So as everything pours in, and we can gather that ourselves and create it ourselves, we can then look at building layers upon that. We can look at applications upon that. That information can move to the self-drives, the connected cars. But as far as the city is concerned, they have to involve everything. It has to be multimodal, so they have to look at pedestrians and bicycles and buses. So we see ourselves as that layer that can collate everything and then move all that information around. Great. That's who we are this week.
Thanks, Marty. And then at the far end, on the far right, from your point of view, we have Jeffrey Zhong, who's a vice president from Visual Threat.
Thanks, Brad. So yeah, Visual Threat basically is like a security solution provider for the OEM and the tier 1 provider. So we have two products. One is we provide a penetration test against the car to just check what's the security vulnerability exists in the car. The other thing is called firewall in the car. So basically it's like the antivirus software inside the car. So basically we monitor all the traffic from outside and also monitor the traffic inside the campus to detect some abnormal behavior. So that's about the visual threat.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So just a little background, why am I the moderator? So I've been working in advanced vehicle electronics and safety systems for the last 28 years. Actually started in robotics and automation with Ford Motor Company. Now we're seeing kind of full circle. It's very interesting to have started in robotics and automation. Now we're talking about automated cars and systems. So in the middle, I've worked on everything from electric power steering systems and steer-by-wire systems, so some of the first advanced steer-by-wire systems that were developed, and more recently advanced driver assistance systems like radar and camera-based systems, as well as vehicle-to-vehicle communications. So been involved in V2X efforts for about the last 10 or 12 years. So with that, let's get started. So the title of our panel really, is connected vehicles. It's quite broad. So maybe we could start, I don't know how many of you are deeply familiar with all the different aspects of connected vehicles, but I thought we could just start by kind of asking the panel to talk about what that includes. What does connected vehicles really mean, and how these connected vehicles interact both with each other and with the outside world, as well as what's really here today and what will we see over the next 5 or 10 years. So I'll open that up to the panel.
So I always like to say, I think there used to be a saying, there's an app for that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what connected vehicle really down to its core really is the enabling of applications that improve safety, mobility, and the environment. And in fact, the US DOT in their connected vehicle research laid out about 53 concepts on what connected vehicles could do in our world. And a lot of these had moved along very far, like curb speed warning and intersection collision avoidance. And there's some others that are a bit still in the pie in the sky world. But essentially, we're enabling vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure communication that basically creates an internet of vehicles and allows applications to run and to improve the driving experience.
Well, I'll add to that. If connected vehicle is a app, let's say it's the extension of your mobile phone, then in my view, autonomous vehicle is the robot. So you basically extended the spectrum from connected vehicle at one end and robotic device machines at other end, and then V2V and V2X being somewhere in the middle. Right? So it's all for improving our lives, for autonomous vehicle driving, as well as for normal functions like getting new music lists downloaded when we want to listen to it.
Yeah, I think that's a great description of the app side. I think that's what connected vehicles are. I mean, right now we're dealing with cities that there's just not much sophistication there. There's hardware there, people put a camera in or whatever it may be, and that's supposed to somehow save the city, that's going to reduce the traffic problems. But really, it's the layer on top that we're missing. So, once that layer is in place, everything really becomes an app. The bus going down the street is somehow built into that system. Somebody on their way to Levi Stadium to park. Everything becomes a kind of app. So connected vehicles, really, it's just one aspect of a connected infrastructure. And that's how we're all going to see it. No different than what we have with the internet, no different than our smartphones. It's all connected and it all feeds off each other. Not one component is necessarily stronger than another.
And I see connected vehicles as data collecting probes, just ubiquitous data collecting probes. And we make decisions about how we operate our transportation systems, how we charge for our transportation systems, how we plan, and how we make billion-dollar investments that don't seem to always make a big dent in our lives. We make those decisions based on really limited data historically. If you actually are in my field, it's kind of shocking and embarrassing sometimes, the data that we use. It's getting better. It's getting better every year. We're already using in-vehicle GPS information now, getting there. But the ability to collect that, not just about how people move and when they move, but also the condition of the infrastructure, the mapping ability. So I think from giving us credible new insight into our world, there's potential there.
And I guess I'd also add, Brian, you mentioned, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to X, which is a specific 5.9 gigahertz DSRC system. NHTSA has proposed that these be mandated on all vehicles sold in the U.S. So they've got a notice of proposed rulemaking out there. Public comment period ended in April. So with the new administration, we'll see how that goes into the future. But so you've got that aspect. You've also got 4G LTE. You've got Wi-Fi, you've got proprietary infotainment systems, you've got systems like OnStar, lots of telematics systems going on in the background. We've even got systems that really were never even conceived of 15 years ago, and that is, you've got the OBD2 port on a vehicle where a technician can access, diagnostic trouble codes and things. And now you've got insurance companies selling dongles that now connect essentially either through Wi-Fi or cellular modems that vehicle bus essentially to the outside world. So any thoughts about all those other things in the same kind of connected vehicle ecosystem?
Yeah, I will say, at every one of these meetings I go to, there's always a big debate about dedicated short-range communication radios, whether they're going to happen, how long they're going to last, and cellular. And I'll tell you right now, I've talked to enough manufacturers of automated vehicles even, and they will tell you they cannot have those vehicles run without DSRC. It's a fail-safe methodology and proven over almost a decade through rigorous testing that allows vehicles to get additional information. So DSRC is here to stay. And I appreciate the fact that 5G is an incredible technology for something that doesn't even exist yet, right? It's all in theory yet for the most part. Folks at Qualcomm would say they have that already. But I think DSRC is definitely here to stay, but cellular is absolutely important. It'll be used for less safety-focused applications, like safety, but more mobility-focused. So I think that's an essential part of the fabric.
Right, and I would say just summarize by saying, DSRC is a very low latency system between vehicles. So if you're doing some kind of collision warning system, that's the kind of low latency system you have to have. When you start talking cellular, even though 5G is promised as a very low latency system, you're still going through towers, trying to figure out which vehicles you need to talk to. There's a lot more that needs to be developed on those types of systems that DSRC really already has. As you've said, it's been proven over the last 10 years. So
I think that, just on that note, I think it's great that we're choosing one. But I do think that this industry is so embryonic, it's so young, that we have no idea how it's going to evolve. I remember sitting in meetings with Ericsson and Nokia saying that the smartphone, that the software is not going to really be that important in the future. And we look around where Nokia and Ericsson is now. I think industry changes so much, it just moves so much. And when we look at our industry now, and I've been kind of, have the scars on my back over the past 10 years from the smartest city world. Try talking about this world 10 years ago. It's just moving so rapidly, and I don't think we know where it's going to go. I think DSRC is great that we've chosen something.
Well, I would argue that we really haven't chosen it. We're choosing an additional one. There's already a dozen connected vehicle technologies that are already in place now, depending on manufacturer. So we're just adding one more to the mix that has that low latency capability.
And I don't think ultimately we have to choose one. I think the cities are going to have to adopt an infrastructure. They're going to have to say where they stand on infrastructure, because ultimately they're the ones where we're going to be gathering data from. But everybody will contribute the data. But if the cities want the ubiquity, which they do, they don't just want cars, they want buses, they want people, they want bicycles. If they want that ubiquity, they're going to have to nail their colors to some flag to say this is what we're going to do. It's that the layer above, I think that's when it's going to take off. But yes, we're at that point now where we have to decide what kind of hardware we're going to use, and who's going to be responsible for that, and ultimately, which is a huge, huge question right now, who's going to pay for it?
And if you look at adoption of smartphones, right, the tool comes first, and then the problem gets created, right? So when people started using video, that's when AT&Ts of the world really were under trouble, and they had to put up LTE, right, in a hurry. So same thing, if car becomes the platform of tomorrow, right? So previously, when it was not connected, they had CAN bus, but now when it's connected, the new applications which develop, which we can't imagine today, are going to create new need for connectivity. So I can definitely imagine when it enters the urban environment, there could be offloading, right? So Wi-Fi could be part of it, although you don't see that with a mobile asset today. There is LoRa, which is definitely low bandwidth, but there could be multiple modes of communication as the problem develops.
No, that's a good point. So, one of the things that I think is amazing about a lot of this technology when you start talking about V2X is obviously, you can have transponders in people's cell phones, in children's backpacks, on bicycles, and we have with, the last discussion, the panel that I attended here was talking about automated and autonomous vehicles and some of the challenges there. And I think one of the biggest challenges is that what I call the first surface problem, right? So the camera sees the first surface, radar or LiDAR system sees the first surface, and you know a lot about that first surface, but you don't really know what's going on beyond that. And these connected vehicle technologies give you real-time information into what's going on hundreds of meters beyond that first surface. Whether it's a 4G LTE or in the future 5G information about traffic problems, down the road, or DSRC V2V that says, hey, the car in front of the truck in front of you that you can't see is slamming on the brakes. You might want to start slowing down. All of that will help come together. So as we see these technologies sort of meshing, I mean, Ray, to your point, there's going to be innovation that we can't even conceive of today. Very much like the internet was in its early days. Why do we need this? Now we can't live without it. So, any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's creating communication beyond the visual horizon is what the beauty of getting that information, advanced information. An interesting study. I can get the source for folks if they're interested. Is they modeled the differences between an environment that was purely autonomous and an environment that was connected as well. And they looked at the differences in the amount of cars you could push through, the throughput. And there's a linear relationship between the number of autonomous vehicles in an environment and the amount of throughput you can get. With connected vehicles, it's exponential, absolutely exponential. So we see it's just by the laws of math that you are able to get much more information, a richer environment, and into a transportation network if you have a connected environment.
Okay, so another aspect, and we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but some of the systems that are out there today are proprietary systems. We've also talked about the potential for NHTSA to mandate B2B, so you kind of have a government-sponsored or required system on vehicles. How do those systems differ?
I'll take on your question, but I was just thinking about what Brian just said. So I have some experience with another mesh technology called Zigbee. Some of you may have heard of it, right? So one of the challenge we faced in the Zigbee world was the cost of keeping everybody in sync is actually higher than the cost of delivering the payload. So what I mean by that is just telling that, okay, somebody's braking, but then telling everybody else who doesn't need to know actually puts a lot of overhead. So that is just a little bit from my experience with Zigbee, which I think is yet to be borne out in short range, right? Mm-hmm. And now going to your proprietary comment. So what is happening in more broader Internet of Things is everybody is innovating on their own. So they either have code on the chips, so it's proprietary for now. And proprietary definitely creates problems, right? And so if
you don't get to that ubiquitous solution.
Right.
Although I think proprietariness just moves up the ladder. Mm-hmm. I think it just, we have a proprietariness, then all of a sudden there's a standard, then we move up into proprietariness. And I think that's where we'll go. So the next level of proprietariness, we see ourselves in there right now with the software. The next level up will be the application. So, what we're trying to create, and I think will be the future, is that a system that can absorb, many applications. And I think that I foresee an application revolution, app revolution, not different from the smartphone. Because what we have, you have companies, small and large, that are now have access to tons of data. So you could have, apps like Levi Stadium guiding people to a parking space, but then you could have apps that people want to see the direction of the sun and how it affects the car and all this stuff. So there's no shortage of how these things can be written, and then there's that layer of proprietariness. But I think it just keeps moving up the ladder where we'll find a stable ground as we move along, and then as soon as we're in constant search of eggshells as an industry, as kind of technologists, we're always looking to kind of move it higher.
So I think we had a conversation before, Brian, that the work with CAMP, I think, is a good example, which stands for
Crash Avoidance Metrics Partnership.
Okay, so that was a consortium of automotive manufacturers, all kind of trying to create a common goal and aim of improving not improving crashes, but getting rid of crashes. And I think similarly, we need to have more of that.
Dramatic.
Yeah, we need to have more of that those type of consortiums from the automotive manufacturers. I think that's a good model.
Yep, no, I agree, and we were part of that, so it was very interesting in the early days, from where things were then and where they are now, which is really ready to deploy. So, Martin, you provided a perfect lead in a second ago. You're talking kind of about external data. How important is external data? And then how will that mesh with the existing in-car sensor and location-based data that we already have on vehicles?
I think if you look at the smarter city world over the past 10 years, say, you have major players like Google and Waze. They're constantly trying to push the boundary in terms of how do we get data, how do we get people to turn on their locators, and then other industries are doing the same thing, other companies. I think that we will be exactly the same. I think our data will come from multi-sources. It won't just be one source. It'll be across the board, and it'll have to. Like I said, if you look at any city and look at what they want, top of their list is safety. It's the number one thing is safety. Congestion, we might think that that's pretty important, but for them, it's the safety. So they want to make sure that a car that is approaching an intersection too fast and there's a pedestrian crossing that road, that somehow that car is going to be notified, either to notify the driver or actually take the car and slow it down. So whatever we do is going to have data come from every direction. You know, so I think it's going to be very important. External
Right.
data.
Also good to notify the pedestrian too. So that's.
But again,
potentially
or
part of
just
the
give
whole
them an
system.
extended green,
Yeah.
or change the lights
Right.
so that they have a longer walk time. You know.
Yeah, to add to that, I think data actually is a lot more important, and it is all about data actually. So safety is a must, and I know there is some pilots going on in Nevada now to get pedestrian data. But just imagine if my connected car, knows that I go from home to work every day, and I stop at Pete's Coffee on the way, right? And now my car insurance company or mortgage service company, they're working with, let's say, the car platform provider, and they can send me an email saying, okay, we're going to give you, this $25 coupon if you can just tell us 3 things. One is, who's your current insurance provider, what's your rate, and when will it end, right? So all they have to do is then send me the new offer on that 2 days
I get those
before
emails
that,
now.
right? So data is definitely going to be important for e-commerce, right? That's going to drive a lot of economics of this. But then now Walmart just announced that they're going to have their workers make deliveries on their way back to work. So you're making the commute time productive, right? But more broadly, there's going to be impact in education. Like, what are kids going to do in the car? Maybe they can watch those 2-minute snippets of some lesson, right? So I think data is a much bigger play, and definitely for cities, it's the customer journey.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes.
That I want to add this, and Brian, I hope you don't correct me here because you're the traffic expert, but the #1 cause of accidents at intersections, it's quite amazing what it is. It is a person who is approaching a red light, or a yellow light rather. The person in front decides they cannot make it, and the person behind decides they can make it. So how many sources of data do we need to stop that? We're going to need to be able to see the intersection. The car is going to need to be able to communicate at speed. The car is going to be able to have to receive communication in terms of stopping. There's lots of different components of work there, and how do we stop a very simple thing like that? And I believe it's something like 68% of accidents at intersections. That's what they're made up of.
Yeah.
Mostly not lethal, thank goodness, but still nasty.
Right.
Well, that's one of the things actually, the B2B, what NHTSA's proposing, with left turn assist.
Yeah.
That's one of the other dangerous things that happens. We've all seen this, right, where a car's trying to turn left, and oncoming traffic, whether the light's almost turning red, it's yellow, and the car turning left says, well, I'm going to go, and the guy running the intersection the other way says, well, I'm going to go, and it's not a good result.
I think too, governments have a role in this too, and there's a lot of, all my clients want to know what they can do to be ready for this, and they're doing some great things. There's a group called the V2I Deployment Coalition, and their interest is to just really understand what they need to do to be ready. And the fact that we have governments getting together and working with car industry, automotive industry to be prepared for that is telling in itself. And one of the best things that came out of this first year of the V2I Deployment Coalition is called the SPAT Challenge. And that's the signal phase and timing that is central to a traffic controller. The idea is that this would be a message that is broadcast from the intersection to vehicles so that you have very specific information on the signal phase and timing of that light. And when you combine that with trajectory information of other vehicles, this is how we avoid collisions. So it's definitely connected vehicles cannot work without infrastructure.
And how cities can get to that, the sought after kind of green wave, so that as you're going through a city, all the lights are turning green at just the right time as you go down, which improves fuel economy tremendously and reduces frustration and accidents.
Yeah.
So
I think some of that public-private interaction is happening, but in a lot of places it's not, or it's just barely starting. I think some of the broader uses of that data for the public good, I think there's still a huge question mark of how we can protect that information, how we can keep what's proprietary and competitive, there, but then also make sure that we're achieving the larger societal outcomes that we're looking for. I mean, the city of San Francisco's just subpoenaed Uber and Lyft for all of their data. They just put out a report yesterday where they actually, with Northeastern University, basically kind of hacked into the API, or basically got some of the publicly available data, used that to infer how much Uber and Lyft activity is happening in San Francisco. You know, it's like 6.5% of the vehicle miles traveled. That's a huge contributing factor to traffic and congestion in San Francisco. We're just beginning to get our heads around it. But that's the sort of data that the city wants. They want to know, you know, are they serving neighborhoods equitably, or, you know, are we creating congestion? Is it helping or hurting? And we don't really know the answer to that, but I think there's a big disconnect right now between industry and the public sector for those sorts of broader uses of the data.
Well, you mentioned, you know, that in some areas really there isn't that interaction going on. Don't you think though that if you get a, you know, kind of a standardized system like a 5.9 gigahertz, you know, V2X system, that would provide that baseline that then cities could say, yes, if this is required on all vehicles, I'm going to install these on my, you know, my traffic light controllers and know where that's going. That seems to be the missing thing, I guess, is that standardization. You know, we have all these different systems. Do you think that's the case, or?
I think I think that's the base layer that has to happen. I think there's also a question about what's provided, you know, what's available, what's provided back from, you know, to the public. You know, is it just, you know, there's privacy issues with that, business issues with that. So I think there's another layer of coordination that has to happen, and I think I'd love to see more innovation happening there. There's a lot of hunger on the public side to do pilots. There's a lot of, you know, eagerness on the private side as well. And I think finding something on the data front to do and getting some major cities together and some major and startup industry folks together would be a great way to move things along.
Great. Well, let's change gears a little bit here and talk about cybersecurity. So, you know, obviously cybersecurity, when you start connecting vehicles, especially vehicles that, you know, their internal data buses were never designed to be exposed to the outside world. Now some of them are starting to be. So don't put an insurance company dong on your vehicle, is my personal recommendation. I have no idea the problems with that. But, you know, cybersecurity, you know, as we go to more automated driving functionality, and I don't mean, you know, level 4, level 5, but even level 1 and level 2, or some of the ADAS systems we have today, where we have, you know, steering assisted driving, we have braking, you know, assistance, you know, for full range adaptive cruise control and things. Cybersecurity is obviously a big part of that, and you know, how is the industry overall going to deal with that?
So like a recent, right, there's some like a vehicle, like a cybersecurity attacks and demos. Like a demo we see in the Fast and Furious, like the latest movie, then someone control all this Jeep car, do some attack. So in the last 2 years, so really demonstrated the cybersecurity issue really exists. And we also do some like a penetration test of all the existing car. So we found all kinds of issues. One like a normal issue is like we can easily just change the ECU setting. So basically we can rewrite the ECU. So the ECU, so what's the ECU? So inside the car, there's like a CAN bus. So ECU is called electrical control unit. So control your steering, brake. So basically whatever you can control normally right now, it's controlled by the ECU. So just for connected car and the autonomous car, so right now, autonomous car have more ECUs because they have like LiDAR, radar, and camera. So this actually give more room for hacker to explore security and vulnerability. So in this case, so right now the OEM pay more and more attention to create some solution, and also they are working on it. But right now the problem for them, they are lack of some automated testing tool, and also they don't have like some cybersecurity expertise. So I'm expecting some collaboration between OEM and security vendor will happen soon.
Great. Well, and you know, 10 years ago, if a hacker was able to gain access through a telematics system to some of the car, they can maybe change your radio station or play around with your infotainment system in some ways. But now we've got some, you know, critical systems that are now being added, you know, in terms of steering, braking, throttle control. And there's a trade-off, and you know, we work with a lot of our members understanding some of those issues. But you you've got systems like steering and braking that really want to know what else is going on in the vehicle, but at the same time, you also want to isolate those systems to some degree so you can prevent these intrusions. Any thoughts on that? There's kind of a challenge with that trade-off on how these systems, can be made cyber secure within a vehicle.
Yes,
a connected vehicle.
Yeah, so right now when we talk to OEM, right, we say why not just install, because we have some solution like kind of like firewall antivirus software. But for the current OEM, so for example, if each car you increase like $10, there will be for them it's a huge cost, because they think about it, they think like 1 million cars. Each car, if you spend like $10 just for this thing, then for them it's 10 million. And security is always kind of like the secondary thing for them. So right now, what we provide is like for this is also related to data. So we provide this thing for free for them, so they can just install. Just like in the Tesla, right? The autopilot feature is already there, but you just need to pay to enable them. So we are doing similar things, so they can just when they pay or try to protect them, then they can enable the service. Then we charge them. So in this way, we can make this entry bar is very low to the OEM. Yeah. So for another thing you mentioned, so for the for example, if we hack one car, right? So we don't want to affect the others. So it's normally dealing with how you design the product. It's more like for each car they have their own private key, all that thing. So make the car is just for themselves. So in this case, there's also like a key rotation, or like some standards, cyber security prevention. So basically, if you hack a car, it won't affect others.
Well, if you go back to the famous case, you might have heard of that Jeep Cherokee being pulled off the road remotely by these two researchers. And they logged into your car when you are driving, and they pulled it off the road, and the driver had no control, right? So, so that has happened, and that actually—
This was just a demonstration.
Yeah, don't try it at home, right? So, but what really, to me, the lesson of that incident was that the Safety Transport NHTSA, actually forced, in this case, Chrysler, right? So to recall 1.4 million Jeeps, right? So on one hand, one incident happened, the cost is millions of dollars in recalling all these vehicles. So the regulatory risk for auto industry is much higher if any of these vehicles are hacked. And the structure of the industry is such that it's fragmented. In this case, the hack was through the chip in the head unit. Now, auto companies can't really tell where their parts are coming from. They do not even know, like the steel or the metal in their car, where is it coming from? How can they tell the code in their car, where is it being written? What happens if it's being written by hackers themselves, right? And they just tell you one chip. Now every car has and it has happened before in electronic industry,
Yep.
Where one of the leading network gear provider, the biggest one here, sold electronic equipment to US Defense Department that had components which were already compromised. So now Defense Department is getting goods which are new, which is already compromised. So because the industry is fragmented, how do you control that individual ECUs? And how do you verify the code on those ECUs?
Yeah, so that's a very good thing. Just on top of that, actually, not even Jeep. So there's also like a black weather hacker, also hack like Tesla. It's doing similar thing like the Jeep, the Jeep. And also there's like a Volkswagen, like the key fobs, right? Because they normally don't change the rotation key. So we can use that after hack. So we can use some universal. You can open like a millions of Volkswagen cars. Yeah. And also when we do some testing, also find that because inside the car, right, there's some like some secret keys. Their secret key is always 11223, and also some keys called gems, some hello, just like all the common like a password. You can see all these when you
like admin for our Wi-Fi router, right?
Yeah. It's always the same. So exact same thing happening in the car. And also for car, also it's dangerous because once you hack a computer, computer won't move. But if you hack a car, compromise a car, you can control the car, do the things maybe not good. So.
You guys are making me nervous.
Well, people ask me what keeps me up at night, and it's cybersecurity and automobiles. It really is.
Yeah,
and I'm not worried about 15 years from now. I'm worried about today and the next few years.
You know, and there's good efforts being done at the Fed level with this concept. It's the security credential management system, and there's thoughts that the idea being is that the road sign units that talk to your vehicles would give you a certificate and turn off the lights in the room. But the folk, I guess it would operate similarly to the way ICANN does, which is the entity that operates and distributes, controls the internet, really. So there's efforts being done. The thing that concerns me, though, is that the DOT doesn't necessarily know the business model behind that and how that's necessarily going to be rolled out.
Who are the baddies?
The baddies?
Who are the ones that are going to be hacking in? Are they burglars? Are they terrorists? Are they the Russians? Who are they?
Yes.
All of the above. I think the ones to be most concerned about would be nation states, right? So, not the major
Today
banks,
we have a problem with kids at airports shining laser pointers at airplanes. I can imagine a situation with DSRC, kids standing by the freeway with a button that it pretends to be a car. It tells every car to stop.
Right.
Although this is, what Brian was talking about, DSRC is the system I'm least worried about, really, because as Brian mentioned, the Security Credential Management System or Security Certificate Management System, SCMS, is designed to send, certificates along with your
That's
messages.
going to be my next question. What is the current state of security?
That problem hasn't been solved as far as I understand. But the question he just asked is the same question I have, and certificates don't solve that. Because I take a DSRC radio with a valid cert from a crashed car from a junkyard, now I go stand in the intersection.
Yeah.
Yep. One of the beauties, though, of the DSRC system is that it has limited range, right? So you're not going to affect the entire fleet. If you were to do something like that, you've got a range of 300 to 500 meters. So most hackers love hacks where they can attack 1 million computers at once and find the one that is vulnerable, rather than trying to attack just one or two, unless they're going after someone for specific
But
reasons.
I've stopped
if it's
10
that
cars
trivial
under
to
a
do,
bridge
though.
on the freeway. I've stopped the whole.
Right, you stop the whole traffic on the freeway. So if it's that trivial to do, why are automotive OEMs going to adopt this? Because we looked at it, and from our point of view, it doesn't make sense from the
All the
autonomous
OEMs
system
are on board with
to
this.
listen to the B2B system. You can only take it as an advisory input because you have to be able to verify visually that there's actually someone stopping, or you can be being spoofed.
That's correct. So you would use it to initiate warnings unless that was corroborated with radar or other sensor data on
Right.
the vehicle, and then you might initiate an active stop.
Which also can
but
be hacked, right?
Right, that's why you need multiple redundant systems.
Yes.
I mean, it all
No,
can be
it's a good
hacked,
point.
everything. I mean, we work with the changing of the lights, and we, in our company, we have this kind of scenario where we play in our heads of the Italian job. People shutting down entire sections of the road to make somehow a great escape, and then these things are all very real. I mean, the way that we kind of look at security is we break it up like you would your computer. You have server security and you have individual intersection security, and that's how we've approached it. So.
Yeah, Brian, you just said that you were worried about 1 year time, not about 15 years.
Right.
Why are you so confident about 15 years?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm confident. I think people will be much more realistic 15 years from now, and they'll actually air gap or isolate systems that are critical so that you can only get access via a plug-in wire, right? We've seen this,
So you restrict.
The thing that what worries me is if you look at the world, we've had network systems now for 40 plus years, and you'd think the hacks would be going down. They're getting worse.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And our most secure systems in the US are all getting hacked, that are guarded by our best people using the best equipment available. So I think, the community is being realistic about, the approach to that and what access a potential hacker would have. Not even knowing the method they get in there, but knowing that if they do get in, they don't have access to these particular systems. So you call that, secure by design architecture. So those are all being worked on by OEs now. so that you have partitioned architectures and things where, that you can't get access to the entire network. The problem today is, and I think somebody down there, Martin or someone mentioned, the CAN bus, designed to be incredibly extendable, flexible, robust. You plug in an additional module, the other 20 modules on the bus don't care that there's another module. They don't even know what it does, but they allow it to listen in and transmit. You don't want that kind of system in the future.
I think also I can add to it as well. It's also the way we monetize software over the past 20, 30, 40 years. Originally monetization was, you bought the computer, somebody made money, you bought a software system, somebody made money. And then the transition came where really all this freeware came, and really what became value was your name. Your name, your details, your credit card, your this. That became the real value. So there's a vested interest to hack it. I think when we look at the next generation of smarter cities, I mean, for us, it's not going to be about who you are. We have a completely anonymous system. We don't know what kind of car you drive or anything. What is important to us now is destination. That's going to be the real value. Because if we can have multiple destinations, and we can help fix the city and spread traffic, and ambulances can basically be prioritized, but everybody is prioritized in their own way. So it's what value is there in destination anymore? So I don't know if the hacking of the city itself is going to have the same value as it had in this generation, where there were credit card details with personal information.
Right.
Well,
So if you look at a hacker's motivation, so hackers spend weeks, sometimes maybe months, trying to hack into systems. So why would they invest their time, right? So I believe with the connected car, it's still the same PII data. It's information about you, which has the money, because the car would have credit information, and it is your location history and your movement history which would be sold, right? So again, that's going back to the PII information. The state actors and causing accidents, one of those one-time incidents, those are more serious. Those we put in the industrial cybersecurity bucket, right? And that's how Stuxnet happened, and so some of the air gaps were violated. So those we have the layered approach. Like when you leave your home, you have the lock, you have the dog, you have the alarm, and you still call to see if anybody's in there, or so you'll have a layered approach. Same thing in the automotive world. We need a layered approach where they think through.
I think the problem here is you're trying to secure something that fundamentally needs to be open. You're following my car, your car, and my car says I'm going to stop. Well, I don't want to negotiate certificates and keys.
So you're absolutely right. So
you need to know that I'm going to stop. So that has to be open information.
So you're absolutely right. So the way to kind of avoid any value being there is that nobody really knows who you are. That's how we see it. Nobody knows who you are.
Spoof it as a teenager with a dongle by the side of the road. So
Well, the system's being designed to make that very difficult to do. So
I don't know how.
we can talk offline. We don't want to get into too deep into some.
But a nation-state attacker needs to spoof, 5 of these dongles to shut down all the major freeways in the U.S. and shut down the economy for a day. So that's the main issue I would see. It's not just a teenager attack.
So if you're talking about B2B, so 5.9 gigahertz, there's protections in place against exactly that, but also the point that you're not actively applying brakes or steering based on a radio signal. I don't think you'll really ever get to a point anywhere where you treat a radio signal, no matter, because you're never sure who it's coming from, right? And that you're going to take an active action that could cause an accident or a problem based on that.
Well, I wouldn't say you're never sure. I think there probably are technologies with, where you can detect the speed of light, transition time, and directionality or whatever. I don't think B2B is it. I don't think DSRC has the security properties to be able to detect where the signal's coming from or how far away it is.
No, yeah, it really doesn't. But what it does have is the security certificates, which we've talked about a little bit here, essentially are issued to the vehicle or to the modules, in advance.
To a trusted.
From a trusted
it's a proxy,
authority.
It's not a direct, there's no way to
It's the
directly
same,
verify.
same way your
that
cell phone
it's
system works
that
today,
car
though.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
This is not, inventing new things. This is applying a lot of known technologies that have been proven to work pretty well. Yeah.
Just to take us off maybe a little bit of a different direction, I'm kind of curious about, with all this data being collected, cars are full of sensors, now we've got vehicles that are upgrading vehicles, infrastructure, communication, who does that data actually belong to?
That's a fantastic straw man lead in there. So that's actually what we wanted to move to next. So a couple of things. So exactly that. So number one, what kind of data is being collected, and then we can get into the issue of who owns that data and who needs that data.
I'm driving a car around.
Yeah.
I'm looking at potholes, broken stop signs, all that. Does that data belong to me, the car company, to the city that I'm driving through? Who gets that data?
So once you, for example, if you use Facebook, right? When you check Facebook, the data policy, you say that all the data you pass in post,
Yeah.
you belong to Facebook. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So once the data you bought someone the car, right? For example, if the car install someone like a firewall something, pass the data to like a cloud, so the cloud provider, whoever install that software owns that data.
I think,
Similar like a Google. So you post anything, all the data
Yeah,
belongs.
but I can choose to not participate in Google or Facebook. I can't choose to not participate in my car collecting data as it drives around because it's doing. I mean, yeah, I probably had to sign some 23-page fine print agreement saying I agree to this, but I don't sure I really do agree to it.
I think that one thing we're probably going to have to look at in the future is with the city being involved, there's going to have to be some kind of revenue sharing with the city. Because I mean it is anonymous data, and data is money. So companies who are putting all this effort into it on behalf of the city, ultimately, on behalf of your socioeconomic comfort life, will invest heavily in that and need to make their money back. So I think that there probably will be some kind of revenue sharing with cities.
Yeah, so if you look at it, there's two kinds of data. One is data about you. Like you come into the car with your families, or you have kids in the car, right? So, and then there is data about the city's transportation. So cities put up the traffic lights or the intersection, so they have the data about the city. So the problem is today software doesn't exist which would let you fine-grain and manage access to that data on a fine-grained basis. So right now the model is big data, where you put all the data into buckets, but there's no easy way to manage what is called governance of the data. Once I share some data across boundaries, right?
It's anonymized.
It's anonymized, but still I cannot control. So the model we propagate from is that you own your data and you control it. The problem is today there's no software which will let you do that. Similarly, what we want is cities make the data open. So city, before they get into anything else, they should think, okay, I'm going to put this piece of software. Anybody that wants to put in infrastructure, whether it's the parking, whether it's the light, they have to commit to this policy of making these pieces of the data public. And there is a open infrastructure, so you can go to Berkeley.com and get this data anytime.
And that is happening. I mean, we are installing in San Jose, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're making part of that data available to the general public through a dashboard. So that's already in place.
But I think it's also key to go back to the comment that there's many different kinds of data, right? So there's personally identifiable data, right? So your credit card information, who you are. There's knowing that you are the same as that vehicle that's moving down the road. But then there's also anonymous data, which you're referring to too, which is like, oh, there's 10 vehicles on this road at this particular stoplight, or 20 vehicles on that intersection. That kind of more anonymized data, but still very important to city planners and SPAC controllers and things like that. So I think you're going to see a lot of different levels of sharing, and on the other hand, privacy, depending on what type of data it is. So.
What about Google?
Well, first I'd like to ask.
Sorry, just in terms of personal data, BMW announced last week that they have the power and are enabling their car owners to have control of their data. So they will have a portal that they'll be able to go to, My BMW, something to that effect. And this already exists in Europe, but they're rolling it out for the US. And that is that you will have control of your data. You'll be able to give permission at will. You will also be able to revoke it at any time. You will also be given opportunity to monetize that data as well. So if you're, they view it as this is your option to use this. It is for you to permit, not us as the car company. And it's a tremendously powerful concept that is completely lost in America. We are so used to just clicking, yeah, sure, oh, whatever. It's like, I mean, I can't get off that fast enough because I just want my app to download, or I just want my thing, or whatever. But they're saying, no, you can have your cake to a certain extent and eat it too. It's yours. So I think that more will go that way. But in terms of municipalities, it's kind of a joke. Whose road are you driving on? I mean, you, by entering this road and driving on it, or that state or that federal government or whatever, it's like, why shouldn't you give all anonymous, you need this for the road to operate better, for the traffic to operate better? That's it should be in the front of the town. When you cross this line, you are agreeing to turn over this anonymous data so that we can make this driving experience better for you.
I think one challenge with that is how the municipalities, how the public agencies can monetize that data, because there is, they'll open source it. That's generally, that's the path that we're going, but they don't necessarily have the resources if they're not getting some kind of revenue off of that to pay for all those sensors and detectors. So I think finding that is key.
I think that's exactly right. I think what's going to happen is that I don't think the cities will know how to make money from it. I think it's going to be companies like you mentioned, Google. I mean, imagine Google in a different world, or imagine a different model where it's not based on your personal information, but based on something different, the destination. And how would you monetize stuff like that? How would you monetize
Does it have to be about monetization? I just want
well,
a better road.
Because I know, but who's going to pay for it?
So
I mean, the cities have a pretty tall order. They want congestion reduced, they want pollution reduced, they want this reduced, they want cars to not have to wait for too. I mean, there's a lot of things they want. I mean, who's going to pay for it?
We can't pay to fill our potholes, much less kind of refit our systems. I mean, it's a generational exercise to replace traffic signal systems in a city right now. So if the city has to find some way to at least cover that cost, I think that's the magic sweet spot that we need to find, is where the private sector can take on the cost of the implementation but still get the public good. I don't think the public necessarily needs to make a lot of money, they just need to cover the cost.
I would also add that, cities, I think what you'll see when we talk about DSRC, B2B systems, once that data is out there, people said, well, originally B2B was going to be B2I, until somebody did the math and said, well, to outfit, the primary and secondary roads across the U.S. would be $50 to $100 billion. And then they started saying, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's have the cars just talk to each other. But I think what you'll see cities and states do is, 48 of the 50 states have, geolocated accident data. So they know exactly where the fatalities occurred. So in a particular state or city, they know which intersections are the worst. They know which times of year things are bad. You start outfitting those intersections or those curves with curve speed warning transponders and things that will interact with the vehicles coming by, and you could dramatically reduce the fatalities, because in a very systematic and thoughtful way, by starting with the worst intersections and the worst highway spots and then going on down. Then as you get more money, you take on the next 10 or 20 spots and you just keep improving your system.
But we have to find a way to pay for that.
So it's kind of almost a free market approach, right?
Yeah.
But
and that, we can't, the gas tax is our primary source of transportation revenue, and that's
going away quickly, right?
Hopefully.
Going away quickly,
well,
yes.
What are we going to replace it with?
But I think this
if we move to a usage-based fee or something like that, that's going to be a much more equitable and ideally something that's actually tied to inflation. Because right now the gas tax is not, so it's worth less every year. And cars are getting more efficient. It's just getting hammered on every side.
Or they're electric and they don't.
Right. So we need to find a new sustainable model for transportation funding anyway. So let's find a way where we can pay for some of these upgrades as well, get some of the value capture that other people will get to do that, and achieve a public good. I think that's really the tough thing, is to get industry and government together.
I think also like a lot of these questions are all coming together, like your question about DSRC. So who's going to pay for it? Why are we using systems that we're not quite sure about DSRC? Because if somebody can hit that magic bullet and say this is the system, hopefully the federal government might move in and say there's grants for this. so cities may have something down the line. So we're all trying to find a standard super quick, and that even goes back to the whole hacking question. Maybe we're all moving too fast to just get something out there, because there is a lot of potentially there's a lot of government money, who knows? And potentially
more. And that's why a mileage-based user fee would be a good.
BMT.
Yeah, there needs to be. Yeah. In order to get us into this new generation of vehicular traffic.
And there's some, there's steps in that direction, but we have a long way to go.
I'm from Europe, and so I've seen things in Europe that are not always great. That we introduce taxes that you think, another one, and really the best thing in Europe is drive around in a 1 liter pedal car or something. The taxes are everywhere. 'Cause, Europe hates cars. At least America likes cars. At least you're allowed to drive one here. So I think there is a balance somewhere. There is a nice balance. But of course, who's going to pay for it?
You're talking to a cyclist, so.
So Stacy, your question is a perfect lead into one of our other topics too, which is, who authorizes the sharing of the data? And that's one thing, when we talk with our members and OEMs, there's a lot of question marks out there on who owns it and who can choose to authorize a particular type of data to even be shared and transmitted. So, any thoughts on that, Zhong?
I can share the model I have in mind for this, but it doesn't have, there's no easy answer. These are very tough questions. So the model is that first you need to look at who's the data creator. So if I'm the data creator through my actions, right, by clicking on the web or by driving a car, I need to have access to that data. Then there is the question of who is responsible for this machine. And I'm surprised BMW is saying you can own the data. What happens if they need that data tomorrow to improve their vehicle? And if I say I'm not going to let you see any of that engine performance or lighting, did I switch on the lights in the rain time or not, right? So the party which is creating the devices, which has the responsibility to give you safe devices, they need access to that data. Now, do they need to know you drive with your family or not? Maybe not, but they do need access to some data. And then the third leg is who is liable. So if things go wrong, is it the city? Is it the fire department? Is it the insurance company? Is it the school principal? Who needs to know? Yes. Right?
It's always the school principal.
Who is liable if things go wrong? And so there will be some sharing of data. So that's why going back to, what is that data which is being shared between ownership, responsibility, and liability, and how do we share it? So I think that there needs to be some sort of software created for that.
Brian, so I think this is Rafael Reyes with Prospect. One piece that I think we should all bear in mind when we're taking Google and Facebook as examples is that the model there is actually not that they inherently own the data, but the entity that pays for the infrastructure controls the data, right? So if we take that as a principle, right, and a customer is paying for the car in its entirety, right, then an extension of that would be that the car owner, right, should be the one to have that level of control, right? If cities are deploying infrastructure, then the cities naturally will want to have control of that data.
But there are different kinds of data too. I think we just need to make that clear, right? So some anonymous data about what a car going by at a certain rate or something is very different than your mother's maiden name and your credit card.
Sure, of course.
So, but you bring up a good point.
I was just thinking about like autonomous vehicle companies that are going to be like ride-hailing services. Like imagine Uber without drivers or Zoox. And these cars have tremendous data gathering capability. They know everything about their environment because that's what they have to do in order to be self-driving. And that's data that can be valuable to a city. Most of those companies are not saying, we're going to share this with the company. That's our data. It's coming back to us in a proprietary way. And why should we share it? And they're certainly not going to share it with each other because, that's their bread and butter. So this is, I just see a problem with it.
I think inevitably there will be that proprietary commercial information that we're not going to get. I think there are some examples where it's in best interest of the public and private sector side to do that. I think the transit feed information that's coming, the generalized transit feed, which gives you real-time public transit information. I think that we have to explore the opportunities to find out where are those things that there's mutual benefit, and I think the San Jose pilot right now that they're putting out, I think is an interesting opportunity to not just explore a pilot service, but actually to explore a data partnership. Because I think there are some bits of information that you can strip out that are going to be mutually beneficial for people to share. Obviously, there's proprietary stuff that's not going to be in that, but I think the opportunity is great if we can find the right partners to be willing to find where is there some common ground where we can agree that we can share.
And even the autonomous vehicle companies themselves who are competing with each other, I think they would create a safer environment if there was some data that they did share. Like if they know this is if one company knows this is a dangerous intersection, the other company doesn't know that.
Right. Yeah. There's benefit for knowing, being able to address congestion hotspots, actually, collision hotspots. There's benefits. You get just high levels of pedestrian activity. I mean, there's all sorts of things where it's in everybody's best interest to know.
Right.
To find it, I think the trick is to find those pieces of common ground and put some standards.
It's a give and take, like Google Maps, you can't use it unless you're sharing your data. I love Google Maps, and I'm going to make that decision to give my data because of the benefit is just, to me, it's more than me giving away data, my anonymous data.
That's a very good point, and that's really what happens with apps today, right? People sign away a lot of, fairly private information or access to things in exchange for that benefit, or the perceived benefit.
Yeah.
So, question.
That's,
we've got about 3 minutes left. But.
So I think that I'm kind of following up on the giving away privacy concept, and that, for example, the BMW example, that I don't think it's necessarily true that you need everyone's data to improve the product. I mean, just as an example, Ricky's mentioning Facebook and Google is the only way to do it. There's a bigger company in town called Apple, and they do data collection through techniques like differential privacy. So instead of collecting everyone's answer, you have a randomized answer, and using statistical methods, I can still get the data I need anonymized without knowing anything about an individual. So giving the user control of their own data, I don't think is that far-fetched. I think it actually long-term is the right thing for us to do as a society, because if we don't, if you look at all the different forms of data being collected and the way they can be put together and what the real impact of that is.
I think that's really a really good point, that we can move incrementally. It's not all or nothing. I mean, in traffic engineering, we've started from, we do when I started my career, we would do one intersection count, like on one day,
right?
In one time period, in like every 4 years, because it was a very manual exercise. And then you're timing the traffic signals based on that, right? And so, if we can get 20% of the, 5%, 1%, I mean, that's orders of magnitude better than what we're used to dealing with. So there's plenty of room for improvement there, even incrementally.
And another difference is that Apple is a closed loop system. Will BMW want to do a closed loop system? I think eventually it's going to be car as a platform. Right. So, if you put your eggs in closed loop system, that's a very dangerous strategy.
Oh, I agree.
So that's what, you have to weigh from that.
You don't know an iPhone, do you?
So I'll ask one quick last question here. What changes do you all see coming in the next 5 or 10 years that are going to change or improve vehicle connectivity?
It's all going to change.
Yeah, we're at a period right now where, you talk about the iPhone, we talk about the iPhone. I don't think we can really comprehend where things are going to go. I think that, when the interstates were built, we could envision that we would drive a lot more and it'd be easier to get from place to place. We never thought that we knew that Walmart was going to be created. I mean, there are these secondary things that happen, and I think this is a level of particularly autonomous vehicles, but improved vehicle connectivity in general is that level of transformational change that it's really difficult to say. That's what's exciting about it.
I heard somebody say recently that transportation is the only area that we haven't innovated in since the invention of the car. Arguably, if you look at the cars that we have on the road today, It's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
A combustion engine that takes you someplace.
I think the jet engine was the last big thing.
Yeah, right. So, and you know, information technology is the latest, and I think we're seeing the merge of the information technology and transportation, and this is just the beginning. That there's going to be some pretty amazing things that happen. That you know, that again were brought up in the opening discussion here too. But we need an innovation in transportation.
I agree. Well, on that very positive note, lots of interesting things ahead, I think. A lot of challenges to be solved, especially with cybersecurity. But please help me thank the panel for a very